panel series that we're working on doing. You're part of the first iteration of that, so if you have any tips and pointers, we'll gladly take them after. But this is really about giving dealers, people that are in the art business, an idea of my peers and what they're doing in the art business, and helping those understand how to leverage, technology that's being built in the art world, and they will introduce themselves individually to you after. You may or may not know Eileen. She'll be moderating, and then Moira, Adam, Car, and Yossi, each run their own companies, and you'll hear more about that in their introductions. But I'm excited to have you here. Thanks for being here. My co-founder, Steve Miller, is probably still bringing people into the room, or he's coming in the back. Steve, quickly wave. That's Steve Miller. He's one of the co-founders of Arternal. Thanks, Steve. So without further ado, hopefully you guys are warmed up. It's cold outside. I flew in from LA and I'm still defrosting. And I'm going to pass the mic over to Eileen, who will take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. And I want to thank everybody for coming on this cold Friday morning. Sean and I have had many conversations about art and technology, so I'm really happy to be moderating this panel and sitting with all of you. One of the things that we were discussing yesterday, and it was actually a suggestion from Adam, I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves shortly, was that he thinks we're at a stage of sort of like 2.0 as far as technology and art are concerned. We've all, watched some experiments in the past with enthusiasm and a lot of attention to see how the two realms might meet. Some have been more successful than others. There's been a lot of experimentation. And I think it's a great moment to look at where we are now, what we've learned from the past, and what's ahead. So having said that, I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves, starting with Moira. Moira, sorry.
Close enough. Hi, I'm Moira Cowan. I'm an independent consultant working primarily with art businesses, so galleries, businesses that serve the arts. And my role is really to help bring in that left-right brain view of how do you craft a strategy, how do you sort of build a successful and effective long-term business in the art world, given the challenges and also sort of idiosyncrasies of the business.
Adam Fields, founder of Arta, which is a technology-enabled logistics marketplace focused on the movement of art, furniture, antiques, kind of objects over $10,000. Started it in 2014 and have been trucking ever since, trying to take over the world and make shipping and logistics easier for sellers of art.
I think this might. Hi, I'm Carlina Moeller, and I'm the co-founder of Art Frankly. Art Frankly is essentially a LinkedIn for the art world, and it is a place to find jobs, spaces, and other opportunities.
My name is Yossi Hines. I'm Carlina's co-founder of Art Frankly. I came on to kind of help Carlina and guide her idea through ideation and development, etc. So I've learned a lot about the art world through her, and that's helped me to kind of put my experience and my know-how to work to bring this business to fruition. Thanks.
Great, thank you all. And to go back to the 2.0 thing again, I thought maybe it would be good for Adam and Yossi and Carlina to talk a little bit about the idea of peripheral services. Some of these businesses that started out wanted to be e-commerce platforms, with limited success, and then some of them start branching out. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the idea for, the specialization, peripheral services, and how you came up with it and how you plan to implement it, keeping in mind what you've learned from past challenges.
So I was on the founding team at artspace.com, which was kind of, in the early stages of art and technology. I think it was at a point where everyone kind of knew that this is a world and a space that was very antiquated, kind of lacked technology, and you knew that there was going to be some changes in it, but the muscle memory and changing the way people think and operate obviously takes time to break down. What I saw there was that, no one was buying anything online, period. Now, all of a sudden, we're in a space where you put something on Instagram, and someone's like, hey, can I buy that? And I think, you saw, ArtSpace, Paddle8, Artsy, Auctionata. I mean, there's so many kind of, ArtNet, so many selling platforms that kind of help break down those initial barriers. And I think now that kind of luster has worn off a bit. And I think now we're seeing, well, how can we make sellers online and offline more efficient? How can we give them tools to succeed in a world that has increasingly smaller margins, is increasingly more competitive, more global? And I kind of saw shipping as kind of the Achilles heel of that. It affects online and offline businesses. If you can take the shipping side and make it easier, then you can enable online sellers. But it also affects offline, retail galleries. Smaller galleries have a huge issue in terms of, well, if you're the owner of the gallery, you might be responsible for everything, including shipping. That shouldn't be your focus. If you're a bigger gallery or a bigger seller, maybe you have 5 registrars that are focused on the movement and logistics of what you're doing. But at the same time, that's a huge cost. It's a sunk cost. They're not revenue generating. I think everyone here, is focusing on things that make people more efficient, can streamline things, make the world more connected. And I think that's what I'm seeing. There's less focused on the selling aspect today, more focused on how can we be more efficient, how can we kind of grow businesses. And I think that's kind of where I see the 2.0 side of it going.
And to piggyback on what Adam said, I think we need to adopt technology in the creative industry to streamline services. For us, we are trying to make the hiring process more simple and more efficient, and giving companies that are hiring greater access to candidates from around the world, not just from in New York City, but if you're in New Orleans and you want to move to Montreal, how can you find that job? What is available to you? And I think while Adam is making the shipping and the logistics easier, we're making HR easier and connecting people and giving all people a chance to find the right job.
It's funny what Adam just said. Whenever we talk to young startups, young companies in the arts, the conversation always starts with, the problem in the art world is, and then everyone pretty much sounds exactly the same for about 2 minutes, and then they break into why that their company's going to change something, and it's good and it's right, and it's interesting comparing that to more traditional industries which adopt these technologies and create new solutions more quickly and easily, and why that's not happening as quickly in the art world. For various reasons, the art world is different, like we were talking about yesterday. But we are now adopting it. There are companies like Adam's, like ours, and various others that are addressing the issues, and individual professionals who can really step in and help guide some of these businesses towards the efficiencies that we're seeing in many other industries with different technologies. So, yeah, it's an interesting time.
Great. This next question is from Moira. You brought up yesterday, where do you think some of the biggest opportunities for leveraging technology are in the art world? And I thought you could talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. That was loud. Well, I think, the biggest thing I see working with galleries or art businesses is this sort of absence of information or absence of rigor around the information and insights you get. So when you're trying to plan, where is my business going in the next year, 5 years, 10 years, there's not a lot to go on. And some of that is naturally just the nature of the market. So people don't know what's going to be big in 5 years or what values are going to be. But at the same time, I think businesses that are bringing in technology, so, like my co-panelists here, in terms of bringing in efficiencies and ideas to normalize certain operational things, I think bit by bit, if you layer those on and you bring in that information, so whether it's information around shipping or information around how you manage that process, how you manage your client information, how you manage your people in your organization, all of those together, if people start adopting them, will bring in sort of a new layer of efficiency and standardization across the industry. So again, it's not to say, and I'm sure everyone would agree, that every business is going to be uniform, but having spent time personally in galleries and auction houses, but also in consulting to a range of businesses from banks to motorcycle manufacturers, businesses all have the same challenges, and it's just how you address them. And I think in the art world, technology now is poised to actually help take things to the next level. So beyond the online sources that exist, there's also internal and operational things that can be very valuable.
Great. One of the things that we touched on yesterday in a brief conversation to prepare for the panel was about Instagram. And I mean, I find it fascinating how you're kind of balancing, you know, the uniqueness of an object with it now being ubiquitous across the globe. So I thought maybe, you know, you could talk from your own experience about how that's assisted your business, how it's helped you, you know, what you see as the limitations and the challenges of that. And also we talked about, you know, things being like over Instagrammed or overexposed. Just kind of throwing it open for thoughts on that. Would you like to start?
Sure. I think what's interesting with Instagram we've seen obviously is, you know, over the past 4 or 5 years, it's just become bigger and bigger and a big part of the art market and a big part of communicating information. So what we do have now on the surface is an awareness of like what's new, what's current, but also a very short life cycle. So we were talking yesterday sort of, you know, if you see something the day it opens and you capture it and you post it, 2 days later it's like, oh yeah, that was 2 days ago that was like the cool thing to post. Now you've kind of missed the window. And I think Instagram's created a really great level of awareness, and I think it speaks a lot to the experience of art. So beyond the sort of standard commercial transactions of I'm selling you a piece, or I'm supporting an artist, or I'm organizing an exhibition, Instagram's sort of given a new level of here's what I went and saw. So I went to Art Basel, I saw this, that, and that, and I can give you a story. I went to the Kusama rooms and I saw them. So it's actually, I think, a really interesting tool for raising awareness, also just to the community at large. So I think what's great is it gives art greater popularity, but it's also more about sort of how the experience enhances the commercial. Great. Over there.
And I'd like to speak to Instagram a little bit on how we can use it as a tool for our companies. Yossi and I have found Instagram to be one of the best methods for us to get the word out there. Our Instagram has a model and a formula, and it goes through a 3-picture cycle where we highlight a job post, and then we highlight a user, and then we highlight something that we've seen. And this goes back to our ethos about really making the art world a little bit more inclusive. And I think galleries are certainly discussing shows that will boost their Instagrammable likes and their being out there. But for the little galleries that can't produce those Kusama shows and those Richard Serra shows, I think they should pivot and see what if we do daily things that, you know, are more Instagrammable. But it's interesting how that technology is actually changing the art world as well.
Yeah, and just to touch on kind of Instagram as a whole, it's expanded. Social media in general has offered a way for us to share, generate, and distribute social currency. And for a lot of, like Carly was saying, for a lot of smaller galleries or individuals for that matter, it's very important for their, sad as to say, their brand. Well, for individuals at least, that can be a little sad. But it's very important for them to move forward into this realm and really advertise themselves in a certain way, and the way that they encapsulate themselves and show themselves has an effect on business, has an effect on relationships, and it's important to think about carefully as you use.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we're a technology and shipping platform. We have no business being on Instagram at all. But it's all about brand. I mean, I think we view it as something that can help us kind of proliferate what we're doing and reaching a broader audience. I mean, we're kind of solidifying what's our brand attributes, you know, kind of who do we want to be, what do we want to stand for. I think like that's kind of how we view Instagram. We're not like offering shipping quotes and promoting shipping companies. I mean, I think it's more about who are we as a company, and I think that's kind of how we view social media and Instagram, and it's still kind of coming together, but I see the value in it, and I think it's either about promoting something, you know, like job postings, or, you know, us showing, you know, who we think we want to be as a brand, and I think, you know, there's a lot of kind of manifestations of social media, but I think that's kind of how we view it on our end.
And I want to jump backwards just a little bit. One of the things that we were talking about was sort of like the barriers or the hesitations of galleries or perhaps collectors that you're working with in convincing them to use different technologies to sort of, you know, expedite their business or expedite their collecting. I thought it would be interesting to hear a little bit like some of the direct experiences or beliefs or hesitations that you feel like need to be corrected with, you know, the galleries or the, you know, the collectors that you deal with in terms of shipping, in terms of hiring, in terms of consulting and getting informed about what they're collecting.
Okay, well, I'll just start with the, you know, thing that everyone's heard is yeah, but the art business is different, and my gallery is different, or my business has different needs. So I have a way, and I will continue to use it until I run out of paper or lose my mind, which is, I think, a norm in the industry. I think, what we're seeing is that really, ultimately, there's new ways of bringing in technology, but the core of it is really behavior. So I think, in terms of clients I work with or people I speak to, I think you can't just sort of say, well, here's a great tool, go use it. Here, this is going to simplify your life, just go. I think people have to really recognize that things have been done a certain way for decades, centuries beyond. It's a business built on the handmade, unique object. So everything is about the transmission of that information, that commodity to people, to the public. So it's not about sort of saying, well, no, this is going to make your life easier. It's about saying, okay, how can this work with how you work? So bringing in the technology it's not meant to be a chore. It's meant to be an evolution towards a simplification of things where technology is worth it. And then the things where technology is not part of your business, the actual painting of a picture, if you're still going in that mode versus digital art or whatever, that can maintain. But I think you need to sort of build that culture, and I think within businesses you need to communicate that in a way that people get it and get excited about it.
Yeah, I think one of our biggest challenges is changing the way people think and operate, and kind of changing the muscle memory. And I think I say all the time, like, we're not curing cancer here, but I think all of us as a whole are trying to move an industry forward. And I feel like there's a lot of complacency in the art industry, and that's not necessarily meant to be a slap in the face. It's just kind of true. People have done the same things in the same way for a very long time, and I think that they're fine with that because you're a gallery, you sell $1 million painting or $50,000 or whatever you're doing, you're making money, and it works. But at the same time, things can be done differently to help not just you but your employees, your clients, etc. So I think we take credit. You can pay for shipment via credit card. Like that doesn't happen in the art world. The fact that we take credit cards blows people's minds. It shouldn't. It's standard practice in literally any other e-commerce business. But in this world, it's kind of a revelation. I don't think that's the way it should be. I think that what we're trying to do, again, is kind of hiring. There's so many platforms that are focused on HR in other industries. Why not this industry? Shipping, same thing. There's so many other shipping platforms in other industries, not this one. So I feel like there's big opportunities for what we're doing, but the biggest challenge is trying to change the way that people think and operate. And I'm assuming you would agree with that.
Changing habits is so difficult in this industry, and that's probably what we have struggled most with in the last year since going live. But once you really convince and you show your clients and your users that you're providing them a service that will simplify their lives, not only if it's for a user looking for a job, but if it's for a client hiring a person. But there's also a lot of room to pivot in these situations. We've recently encountered clients that are asking us to simply do it for them. So find the candidates and then you tell us who we should hire. So that's something that is an old school method that can couple with us. So I think you have to listen to your community, but you have to also be adamant on changing the way things work right now. And it shouldn't just be for entertainment in the art world, all technology, but it should be for service and simplifying.
I imagine then that word of mouth is probably very powerful. I mean, Adam, when we last talked, when you were presenting at Art Chicago, some of your financiers or supporters were like David Zwerner and Sotheby's. So I imagine that that's extremely powerful in terms of those clients talking amongst themselves about the experience of having things expedited or streamlined. Do you find that? And I mean that.
Yeah, I'm not a big name dropper in my personal life, but I think from a professional standpoint, if you walk in a room, you're like, oh yeah, like Marion Goodman, David Zwerner, Sotheby's, like, and people kind of open their eyes, like, oh, okay, like if they're using it, we're trying to get other people to be kind of thought leaders in the space, and I think that sometimes you need to do it by association. So from our standpoint, promoting who is aligned with us and kind of who is on board and on the train of trying to move the industry forward is something that is really important. And we're talking, I was talking to Yossi and Caroline about how we can kind of do that together and maybe give some sort of certification to galleries that are using, they use Art Frankly, they use Arta, they use Artsy. these are technology innovators in this world, and if you can give them some sort of stamp of approval, maybe that can kind of show, all right, I want that too, and kind of forcing the issue a bit. We can get a little bit aggressive with people just to be like, hey, what's your problem? This is the way the world's going. Why won't you at least try this? And I think that's what I think all of us want to try to do to push people forward a bit.
There's also a big difference between expanding in New York and everywhere else in the world. Because New York has been set in its ways, to a degree, is the center of the art world. There's so much here. There's so many people here. There's so many schools that feed young graduates to the city. There's not necessarily some of the problems that we're addressing aren't huge issues here, but are greater ones outside of New York. So we're finding our adoption in Boston and Texas and California to be much greater because they understand and see the need for what we're doing on a level that people in New York, others in New York, don't necessarily want to spend time paying attention to. Even though the issue exists here as well, they decide that their time is just not worth it. But they are coming around, of course, in New York. And another point in what you're just talking about with Adam and who some of his clients and investors are, on the other side of things, it helps us to go talk to the kids and talk to schools. So a lot of the art programs and design programs are great feeder programs for us. And that just strengthens our base of users, which then will lead to greater and more high-level clients in the end.
And you're talking to them about what kinds of positions, like what kind of ideas do you get about how they might fill a need or what they're interested in, what kind of...
Well, by going to the best art schools, well, first of all, students will adopt our platform much more easily than anyone older than college age, basically. And by going and getting the best schools to filter their kids into our platform, creating profiles, et cetera, it just strengthens our user base. So it gives us a more legitimate user base, which then can fill in the internships and kind of low-level jobs at a higher rate.
But those testimonials are also key. I mean, Arta and Art Frankly have also linked our services now because they're complementary. And I don't see why any tech company in the art world that's solving a service issue should not just work together. And I think that's probably why technology hasn't been as widely adopted in the industry. So we're here to change that.
Yeah, I think one last point on that. I mean, I think we're in a world of specialization. You need to be really good at your core competency, and I don't think that people in the art world necessarily recognize that. Why should a gallery need an HR person? I don't know. I mean, huge multinational corporations do, but why does an art gallery? Why does an art gallery need 10 people focused just on shipping? There are ways that you can kind of lean and pare down your operation just to make yourself more efficient and kind of raise your margins, in my view.
Okay, great. And my next question is something I touched on yesterday was what are your barometers for success? I mean, you're all relatively young businesses and seem to be plugging ahead and doing well. So I'm curious about what are the encouraging signs or the signs that you're in the right direction in this often fraught field.
So in my case, I think for me it comes in the form of verbal feedback. So anyone I work with, sometimes they'll say, well, why is it that I need to, break this down? I've never done it like this before in terms of organizing, strategizing, setting metrics for a business and planning. And the feedback I usually get comes about a year later where it's like, oh, we set a target, we defined how we were going to get there, we used these tools that we decided were going to be most helpful, and then we did it. And then that was different because it wasn't this sort of blind faith going forward. So I've spoken to art dealers who've changed their habits because they just implemented a few simple processes, and then suddenly that just became a habit where they're like, well, if I just do these simple things, my life is easier and I can get what I want. So for me, I find it's feedback. I think also it's just as you see businesses evolve, there's a greater community. So I think the fact that there are events like this, that there are startups like the ones we're talking to, these are all sort of great indicators that there is evolution in the industry, and I think we are poised for a shift in how people begin to operate.
I think success is tricky. I think all of us here are very successful by a multitude of metrics, but you can't stop with that. I mean, I think we've changed the way that people think and operate already in a very short period of time. We've kind of made some shipping companies. Some love us, some aren't so sure about us, but they know us, and they're kind of unsure, which I think is good because I think you want to make people a bit uncomfortable, and that's the really way that you can change the way people think and operate. I think we've seen in a short period of time that we've changed people's views on how things can be done. And I think that's the main thing that we view in terms of how we gauge success is, can we change the way businesses, high-end collectible sellers, shipping companies operate and think. And I think if we can continue to do that and kind of become the standard for, I don't need to do things the way that I used to do, I think that's our ultimate metric for success and kind of moving the entire industry forward, standardizing technology so that we all can work together and share information in a much easier way. I think that's kind of how we view success. And then obviously getting a lot of likes on Instagram too, right?
Same as Moira and Adam, user testimonials are key to us. When we hear that a user got a job from us, when a client was like, we got the best applicant from you, that's what we're aiming to do. And I think for us, specifically with metrics and data, when we see that we have users in over 40 countries, we know that this service is needed. I mean, we got a job post in Casablanca a couple of weeks ago, and we're like, okay, they need to be connected to the rest of the world too. And
it also comes with third-party technologies, and this is kind of what we're getting to here, that people need to be adopting our technologies. We've adopted a multitude of technologies to track how we're doing on a daily basis. So I sit on Google Analytics for 3 hours a day looking at what's going on, why people are staying for this long or that long. So watching our bounce rate, which is people showing up at your website and leaving, has been going down. How much time people spend has been going up. But I think the biggest indicator for us was when a number 2 at a headhunting firm had lunch with us and started the conversation with, I'm definitely not here to spy on you. And then she proceeded to spy on us for the next 20 minutes, and that felt very good. So.
But then yesterday she posted a job with us. So I think that's a good way to measure that.
I'm curious whether or not you think, so it went from being kind of some services trying to be like one-stop shopping and selling to now, these like more specialized, fragmented businesses. Do you foresee it going back to kind of consolidation, and would that be a good thing? Like, is that going to be the next step, and would that be a positive? I'm not asking you to predict the future, but just in terms of the shifts that you see and what you see looking ahead.
I think there's a few things. I think that to consolidate, you need to have connectivity, and if there's no interconnected world, you can't really consolidate things. So what we're doing a lot now, integrating with inventory systems. So like Philips Auction House, ArtBase, ArtLogic, you can hit a button in these inventory systems, and then that pushes the shipment information to the vendor network. Same with job postings. You have CRM networks like Arternal. You have information that's being stored in certain ways, but you need to have kind of standardized technology to create the vehicles or the lanes and to share that information. So I think until there is that kind of technology highway where you can really easily share and connect in the world, there won't be as much consolidation. But I think we're all trying to kind of get it to a point where that is the case. ArtNet, you guys have so much data, you guys have some great auctions and sales marketplaces. Why can't you guys internally use that for hiring? Why can't you? Well, you guys you use this a lot for shipping, which is great. But why can't we integrate with ArtNet more so that you can make it easier on the sales side? I think that's what we're going to see more in the next kind of year or two as people kind of smarten up and recognize that the technology train is leaving the station, so to speak.
Okay. Cool. Did you want to add anything to that, Maria?
I think just the fact that when you think of the people involved as well, as tools become more useful and applicable, I think you're going to see more crossover as people also shift jobs. Because, my experience, it was a while ago in galleries, but, you work in one gallery and you learn ArtBase, and then you go to another one, you're like, oh, now I have to learn art systems, and there's different things. I think that consolidation at least can start occurring as you sort of have people, a sales assistant starts at one gallery, they get, junior director at a different gallery, and there's that movement in the industry over time too.
Yeah, it's a very incestuous world. We like that to some degree, because if you're a registrar at one gallery, then all of a sudden you move to another gallery, you're familiar with kind of how we work and how we operate, so that helps us kind of grow and spread. I think it's the same. I mean, they love that because they want people to hire, they want people that are looking for jobs. So I'm assuming that makes they love seeing kind of some of that consolidation happening, because it just helps them grow their business.
Yeah, I'd say we're still very early in the online auction world, and we're seeing numbers double every year or come close to it. And that, of course, is going to cause new entrants to show up, and is going to force some of the existing players to change and adapt. But I think for sure we'll see some bigger players start to take hold. Companies with a lot of money will swallow up some other smaller players, and that will certainly lead to larger, more mainstream online auction places that people are more comfortable spending time and money on.
Great. And I think, yeah, we're getting close to wrapping it up. I just want to ask, and I know this is not, I'm sorry. Okay. Just because it's so at the forefront of the news, net neutrality, I know for me, I'm trying to grasp that. I'm trying to understand that. Just wanting to know how you're thinking about that, anything that you're bracing for in the months ahead now that that has been rolled back, those protections that were in place.
Yeah, I know for us immediately there's nothing we can really do. We have to wait and see what's going to happen. We have to wait and see what the internet service providers are going to do with their newfound power. I would be nervous if I were them to make any big shifts because A, they're all public companies, and B, things could change in 3 years from now. But in terms of what we can do and how we strategize, again, we can't do much about it. We're not going to be able to afford to pay, go in the fast lane, so to speak, which may arise in the future. But I'm more interested to look out for costs on an individual basis, which are going to be passed on to consumers, whether that's from Netflix or AT&T or whoever. For sure, more money will be squeezed out of someone, and it's probably going to be us.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we're both a technology company and a logistics company, so I think our more near-term goals are like, how do we deal with the New York State sales tax issue? How does Brexit come into play? I think the net neutrality, is ultimately a bad thing for, you need net neutrality to kind of keep things on a more level playing field and kind of, you don't want to stunt innovation. I think that's what we're kind of standing for as a business. I don't really know if it'll hit the art world as much, but I think it's something that, as a community, as an ecosystem, there should be kind of a stance on that people can kind of come together and take a stand for, which, as you've seen in other instances, is quite possible in the art world.
Just one more point to add that we'll see innovation come out of this, a lot of it, and people are going to be finding ways to get around these issues, get around these problems that are being brought up, and we'll see a lot of new, fun, exciting things come out of this, even though it's a bit depressing. So it's something to look out for as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. We have a couple extra minutes, so I wanted to open it up for questions. Any questions? Cornell.
I have a question about adoption of new technologies. You guys all kind of touched briefly on what Adam referred to as this shift from the art world online. And I think you and I had talked about this as well separately. When it was first, everybody was trying to just sell art online, and that kind of didn't go anywhere. And so as this art world 2.0 online has happened, where you're actually solving for real problems, one would think that there would be more adoption of that sort of technology. You guys also touched on consolidation, but consolidation aside, do you think that there is going to be more of an acceleration in adoption of technology, or is there going to continue to be this resistance unless something is super easy, like Instagram, that really fit well with how the art world works? The art world is all about networking and this sort of thing, and Instagram kind of fit that. So is there going to be an acceleration in this, or do you guys see that, or is there going to be continued resistance because the art world is this old school set in its ways kind of thing?
I mean, I would say adapt or die. I mean, I don't want to be that dramatic, but like Maura was talking about before, if you adopt simple technologies that can shave off percentage points in cost or time, and you start to stack those, it really will make a difference. And the people and organizations who do adopt them, especially the bigger ones with lots of people, Arternal is, we were at your offices yesterday, you have 100 plus employees, whatever it is, it's a lot. If you start adopting some of these technologies and you're implemented across the board, they'll start seeing serious cost and time savings. And the companies who don't do that are going to be missing out. Now, will that cause them to actually die? Maybe, maybe not, but certain players will certainly move ahead, whether that's by a nose or by length.
John, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, I think, this is just a general question, but do you believe that the reluctance to adopt new technology stems from the fact that the art industry wants to be stealth, secret, private, and is very concerned about sharing information, with a third party? Yes. I mean, maybe
That's a great question.
Maybe it's an obvious, it's a statement rather than a question, but I think that's something that technology or people who are adopting or selling technology have to reassure the marketplace of. What's your opinion?
I think it's all context. People's you think that a gallery has a secure technology infrastructure that can't be hacked? Like, exactly. That's my point. My point is that they think they do. You know, you're mailing invoices. I know that like Hauser and Wirth and some other galleries got hacked, and you know, people think that they can do things well on their own. You know, people are, oh, they say shipping. Like, what about our information? Well, you're giving a shipping company a piece of paper with all of your information. What if they just lost that? I mean, would you say that having something on a secure server is less safe than a loose leaf piece of paper?
But that's a bad argument, right? Because that's not really showing anybody about that.
Well, no. The argument is that we are trying to do things in a way that are more secure and better for people. And I think that part of it is ultimately a leap of faith. But at the same time, if you've done things the same way for 100 years, you know, it's a big gap. So I think it's trying to accelerate that gap for people. And I think once people start to see that things are changing and moving in a new direction, you know, as I said, 5 years ago, not that many people thought that you could buy or sell art online. Now, you know, we saw at ArtSpace, we were selling, you know, prints between $0 and $5,000 in our sleep. You know, that's pretty amazing. I think that as people start to see that, you know, there is new and interesting things that you can do, and, you know, you'll wake up the next day and the world is still there. You know, I mean, how many, every day, you know, do you think the world's ending, you know, the art market's crashing, it's a bubble, you know, it's still here. I think as people see that things are happening, they're not going away, slowly but surely, you know, we're all making progress. But I do think that the data security, the relationships, is something that you need to be very cognizant of. And there is a level of secrecy and kind of guarding things close to the vest that I think needs to be recognized but also maintained over time too.
Yeah, and I would just add one point to that. I think also, because I've, you know, certainly encountered that speaking to galleries and speaking with different ones about sort of their needs and maintaining that confidentiality. But I think one of the things I highlight is also the better your tools and the better your information retention, the better your own information is long term. Because frankly, somebody who sits at your front desk could be there for 6 months, leave, and know a lot of stuff, and they're going to more easily spread that around if they wanted to than a software solution that's helping you is going to leak that information. So it's also putting it in perspective, because realistically, you know, I think people are the biggest liability in terms of information, not the technology you're using.
Is there any other questions in the back?
Just again, there's all these references to this term resistance, and I'm wondering, bigger companies like ArtNet aside that maybe have larger personnel needs than say a gallery where there's an owner, a registrar, and a front desk person. I'm wondering if this question of resistance to technology that is applied very successfully in massive industries where there's billions of dollars in volume, multiples of billions of dollars in volume compared to the art market, and this question about, you know, coveting these relationships and this information about your client base and so forth, not wanting that to get out, has to do with maybe an underlying insecurity about the possibilities, limits of absorption, limits of volume. I mean, we assume with increased museum attendance and increased art fair attendance that it translates into sales in a one-to-one way. But again and again and again, we hear reports after fairs of like, these 10 galleries did great and everybody else tanked. That happens every single fair in every single city all around the world. And when I talk to people that I know in the industry that have been around for a long time, there are these insecurities about the disappearance of any sense of rarity of the works of art that are being sold because there's just so much volume of information. And I'm just wondering if this question of resistance might have to do with an underlying insecurity that the dealers, again, I'm just talking about dealers, I'm not talking about other members of the arts industry, which is a huge volume, especially for shipping and HR. But in terms of galleries, what do you guys think of this possibility that there's a certain underlying insecurity about the future of absorption, the potential of absorption? You know, you have artists clamoring for space in galleries, but there's also this limit of how many shows a gallery can do, how many artists they can support, and so forth. Just love to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, yeah, I think you're touching on an important point. It's a hard business. I think that's the main point. Real estate, gallery spaces is really expensive. People are closing down. How many artists can we pick up? Recruiting artists, stealing artists, selling work. How do we get collectors? There's so many questions that a gallery or any business has to deal with that I think that it's hard to absorb much more, which is I think is what we're all trying to do, is allow people to focus on what their core business is, which is sourcing, selling art, creating innovative programming. You shouldn't have to worry about how am I going to hire this, how am I going to ship this. You need to focus on what your business is, and I think that's the point that we're all trying to get at. Is we want to allow people to focus on what their main job is, and I think that if people can understand that and see that, okay, if I use some of these tools, I don't need to worry about all the minutia around me. I can focus on what my main objective is, and I can make a better art fair booth. I can get better programming. I can maybe recruit this artist. I can find this way to this collector. I think that's ultimately what we're trying to do and try to promote to our users that we're talking to our businesses about.
Thank you very much for coming. Turn it back over to Sean for a second.
Thank you, everybody, for spending your morning with us. I hope you enjoyed my peers and what they had to say about what they're working on, and enjoyed this panel. Thank you, Eileen. Really appreciate you being here. Another round of applause for the panel, because they're giving up their day, their morning, to be able to spend with us as well. We're going to be trying to do these on a bi-monthly basis as we're, leveraging this space. And if you don't know what this space is, it is the New Museums Incubator. Take a view as you make your way out. This is where Arternal works and builds our platform. In February, we're gonna do another one of these. Colleen's like, so yeah, we're aiming to do another one in February. We feel like dealers need a hand when it comes to leveraging ad networks. And from Instagram to Facebook to Twitter, everybody's like, well, I put this up and I get likes, but I don't get sales. I was like, well, how much money did you put behind that? Well, none. Well, you need to leverage their ad network in order to be able to, sell through. And so we want to be able to bring in experts from Facebook, from Twitter, from Instagram to be able to teach you how to be able to do so. So stay tuned. Follow us on Arternal CRM on Instagram. Shameless plug. And have a wonderful day. Enjoy your weekend. Eileen, did you have anything else to say? No, you're good? All right. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.